Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. As mentioned, my name is Mia Lavada. I'm with the Center for Internet Security. I'm a product manager responsible for the CIS benchmarks in our cloud offerings. I'll be joined by Naeem here in a second, and I'll start off by talking about the Center for Internet Security, and he'll dive into the relationship with Qualys and CIS. So a little overview of what we'll go over today. You see on the screen here. Like I said, I'll talk about the Center for Internet Security. Naeem will go into Qualys, how those two organizations work together, and then what we're doing to buy down the risk of cloud misconfigurations. So a little bit of history about the Center for Internet Security. We are a cybersecurity nonprofit organization. Our main mission is to provide best practices, what we'll go into today, the CIS benchmarks, and the CIS critical security controls. One of the ways that we support that mission is a membership, and one of the offerings that we'll talk about today as well is the CIS hardened images. Another part of our organization is actually a security operations center. This is funded by the Department of Homeland Security in an effort to provide cyber threat prevention, detection, response for state and local governments. This intelligence informs our best practices, our CIS benchmarks, and our CIS critical security controls. With the expertise in-house at CIS, that's one component of the intelligence informing our best practices. The other component is the community. So Qualys is a great example of one of our partners, one of the contributors in our communities. But many of the folks here today at this event, AWS itself, and maybe some of the folks in the crowd here, actually contribute to the CIS best practices. This happens through a community consensus development process. So we're not just one organization mandating what the best practices are. We maintain and drive these communities, but we harness the expertise of a global ecosystem. The vendors themselves, vendors like Qualys, AWS, help inform this guidance. We bring the greatest minds around the globe to provide quality expertise to help you securely configure your systems. So one of the things that I've mentioned that the CIS does is secure configuration. So we provide configuration level guidance for a few primary reasons. The impact of misconfigurations. So we have a couple statistics up here on the slide, both within the DBIR, identifying how common misconfigurations are, and on the bottom half of the slide, the cost of a misconfiguration, not only to recover from a breach, but the actual tangible cost. How much does it cost you in time and dollars, or money, I should say, depending on where you are, to recover from a breach? So that's where the benchmarks come in. As I mentioned, Center for Internet Security really focuses on secure configuration, and we do this through the CIS benchmarks. Today we'll highlight the AWS Foundations benchmark, which focuses on a few key areas: identity and access management, logging and monitoring, networking, foundational best practice to secure your AWS account. We also have other benchmarks in other what we call product vendor families, so operating systems, databases, networking, applications, containers, and so on, over 100. We, again, use a consensus process, so it's not just CIS mandating this guidance. We're not just telling you, go and set these configurations. This is what CIS thinks is best. This is a global community of experts from a variety of organizations. CIS, AWS, Qualys, many other vendors participate in this development to help bring you the best guidance we possibly can. So a key component to this guidance is also the relationship with configuration compliance standards. So you can see a few here on the screen: FISMA, FedRAMP, PCI DSS, HIPAA, NIST, and so on. When you get to the component of those standards and it says, please securely configure your systems and your software, more than likely, to pass that audit, you're going to use CIS benchmarks. If it's not directly called out, as it is in many of of the frameworks I just listed, that is an acceptable standard to use to help meet compliance and securely configure your systems and your software. And again, this is powered by the community developed component. CIS is not mandating this guidance. We are not the only minds contributing to this information. This is a community developed process with many organizations contributing. And a key differentiating factor is we're not just telling you what to do. We're not saying go and set X to Y. We're telling you how to do it. What is the impact of this setting in your system? What is the value to the security of your system? How do you ensure that you implemented this correctly through descriptive audit and remediation procedures? So I have just one more slide here, and then I'll bring out my co-presenter, Naeem. CIS is a nonprofit organization, so our primary mission is to get these best practices out to organizations like yours. We provide these benchmarks as free, non-commercial use in PDF format on our website, as you can see on the slide here. But we also have membership, and this helps sustain that community process. This helps sustain the guidance that we provide. So within that membership, we offer machine-readable formats of the benchmarks, our configuration assessment tool, known as SysCap Pro, and then we have multiple tiers of that membership. So when I invite Naeem out here in just a second, he'll talk about how Qualys uses the benchmarks in their tool for more automation purposes. We have multiple tiers of this membership, both an end user, so direct internal use within your organization, and commercial, of which Qualys is an example. So they are a product vendor member. We consider these partnerships very important to our organization to ensure that we distribute our best practice content to a larger audience. So I'd like to invite Naeem out to continue the conversation about how Qualys uses CIS benchmarks.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm Naeem Islam. So Mia just created a great description of what CIS does and the benchmarks that they provide. And they've been pretty important to Qualys for our cloud security products. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about Qualys Total Cloud and how some of the CIS benchmarks have been used and been very helpful to our customers. So the Qualys product that I'm going to talk about today is Qualys Total Cloud, which is a risk management platform for the cloud that does unified posture, threat, and vulnerability management, all the way from development to runtime. Now, Qualys' mission is really risk reduction. And so we help companies measure, communicate, and eliminate risk. And we do that in an enterprise scale. And one of the things that we've noticed is that a lot of our customers are migrating to the cloud. And they're doing this in a way where they would like a hybrid environment. But it's enterprise scale. And so making sure that we're able to satisfy all of these needs at an enterprise scale that's hybrid requires CIS benchmarks for us to provide the kind of risk reduction measures that we built into our products. And in particular, what we're seeing customers want is a unified platform that combines posture management, threat detection, vulnerability assessment, all the way from development to runtime, including new concepts such as containers that are becoming incredibly important in the cloud. And so what Total Cloud does is put all of these pieces together in a single platform. Cloud security posture management, where we use that for getting a complete inventory of your assets. That's where some of the CIS benchmarks, the foundational benchmarks are deployed. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. Infrastructure as code, where you're able to check Terraform, CloudFormation templates before they're deployed to make sure there are no misconfigurations. That's a part of our shift left strategy. Cloud workload protection, and that's a little unique the way we do it, because we have a variety of different vulnerability assessment techniques, some of which are for the cloud agentless, but we also have agent-based techniques, network-based techniques, as well as API-based techniques, All of these combine to provide what we call FlexScan, a mechanism to assess continuously for vulnerabilities, all connected to our Six Sigma backend with low false positive and low false negatives. Cloud detection and response, which is our threat detection mechanism, so for any active threats that are occurring, we detect that by monitoring network traffic as well as cloud logs. And finally, Kubernetes and container security. And we do this all the way from development to runtime. We monitor your CI/CD pipelines, we monitor and scan your registries, and we also, at runtime, are able to look at running containers or nodes and monitor them for vulnerabilities. All of this gets combined together in this unique platform that we call Total Cloud, and CIS benchmarks are used throughout. So let me talk a little about cloud posture management. This is one of the areas where we extensively use the CIS benchmarks. We have 1,000 plus out-of-the-box controls with our own best practices. We have 30 plus mandates. And this is an important piece of it, where we have the CIS benchmarks that generate reports that you can see on our dashboard. But a lot of this data, the interesting thing about the CIS benchmark, that a lot of this data can get fed into our risk reduction engine, where we take data from the benchmarks, from threat detection, and from vulnerability assessment, and create one prioritized view of risk. So the benchmark has two different use cases. One is just looking at the benchmark, making sure that the best practices are adhered to. A tremendously important thing that our customers want to do. Those reports are generated. Then the data feeds into our broader risk reduction mechanism, where we look at, for example, misconfigured assets. But if they're misconfigured and there's an active threat, we prioritize that higher. So these CIS benchmarks help us in a variety of different ways to keep our customers secure. In addition, we have alerting and ticketing mechanisms that if you have issues that you need to resolve, they get fed into that mechanism, and the right people are assigned in the organization to fix those issues. So remediation is an incredibly important part of all of this. You've got to fix things that are broken. Now we'll talk a little bit about the benchmarks themselves. The CIS Amazon Web Services Foundation benchmarks, level 1 and level 2. They're pretty extensive. I put the URL for the website there, where we're a very close partner of CIS, and you can get access to those benchmarks from there. But these benchmarks are important, they're foundational. They look at access management. They want to make sure that if you have multi-factor authentication root user accounts, if you've not enabled that, it'll alert you to that. If you haven't encrypted your storage, it'll alert you to that. So a lot of basic techniques that are absolutely critical for hygiene are pretty important. And I say this this is a very interesting comment, because Qualys has 10,000 plus customers that are on-prem, and a huge number of them are migrating to the cloud. And these best practices are one of the first things they look at. What can I do? What kind of industry practices are there that I can deploy to get confidence that my migration to the cloud is going according to industry practices? And CIS benchmarks are a really critical part of that. But as you can see, they're pretty extensive. They look at a whole bunch of different resources, EC2, S3, RDS. There's a whole bunch of different things that they look into. Then there's another set of benchmarks that are operating system specific. As you can see here, we cover a bunch of Amazon Linux versions, and it's important that we look at slightly different things there from the benchmark perspective, like whether files have the right permissions. And we also have an RDS benchmark, which does assessment via native data collection, which is quite important. So if you look at the totality of the different benchmarks that we're using in AWS to make sure that you have a secure environment, it's always important to think about two things. What is the basic hygiene I need as I migrate to the cloud and I adopt these new services? And from a Qualys perspective, how do I feed that more broadly into a risk scoring mechanism so that I can keep you safe by combining it with other aspects, for example, threats, for example, vulnerabilities that may be on that system, and giving you a uniform view of the risk posture that you have and ways that you might be able to resolve that. And then the second phase, obviously, once you've figured out these issues, resolving it through the Qualys dashboard. So that's a brief introduction to what we do with the CIS benchmarks. I just wanted to say that these benchmarks, we participate in with CIS in generating them. I think there will be more. The cloud is a rapidly evolving space. I encourage those of you who are also looking at cloud security to participate with CIS and us. We hope to have more events and events to gather feedback to evolve new benchmarks. So thank you very much.